Hi everyone, this is the second video on speed, distance, time problems. So we're still going to be using the speed, distance triangle from yesterday. The speed, distance and time. So just a quick reminder that if you're trying to find, for example, the time, if you cover up the t, then you've got to do d divided by s. If you're trying to find the distance, you would cover up the d, and then that means you've got to times the speed and time together. And if you're trying to find the speed, cover up the s, and you need to do distance divided by the time taken. So the questions today just involve a little bit of extra work. You'll see what I mean in a second. So this one here, we've got Stuart drives 180 kilometres in 2 hours 15 minutes. Work out Stuart's average speed. Now, before we start, I'm just going to show you something that lots of people do that's incorrect, and then there's a couple of different ways that you can work this out. So the first thing a lot of people do is they cover up the s and say, oh, it must be distance divided by time, which it is, and then they do this. They do 180. I'm going to do it over here because it's not right what I'm doing. So 180, and then they divide it by the time, and they think, oh, it's divided by 2.15. Now you've got to be really careful with that. 2 hours and 15 minutes is not 2.15 hours. So when you think about 15 minutes, that's actually a quarter of an hour, isn't it? So 15 minutes is quarter of an hour. So a quarter as a decimal is 0.25. So if you were trying to change this into hours, rather than 2.15, it would actually have to be 2.25. And then you could do 180 divided by 2.25. So that method is absolutely fine. If you're confident in how to change hours and minutes into hours like that, then go for that method. That's absolutely fine. The other way is to do it a bit more similar to how we were doing it yesterday. So if you've got 2 hours and 15 minutes, we know there's 60 minutes in an hour, isn't there? So that would be 120 minutes there. So altogether that makes 135 minutes. If we do 120 plus the 15, that's 135 minutes that it's taken him to drive that distance. So if we're now trying to work out the average speed, you cover up the s. So we've got to do the distance divided by the time. So the distance is 180 kilometres. And we're going to divide that by the time. So I'm going to use the 135, but all you just need to be careful of is that that's going to be in kilometres per minute, because my time is now in minutes. So when I do 180 divided by 135, that gives me 4/3, or you could say it's 1.3 recurring. But like I said, that is going to be kilometres per minute, because my time was in minutes. So if the question, this one doesn't actually say, but on your question it will say work out the average speed in kilometres per hour. So if this is how far he's going to go in a minute, well, there's 60 minutes in an hour, so I just need to times my answer by 60. So although this method is slightly longer perhaps than the one up here, I've just seen so many people make that mistake that I think actually it might be worth changing it into minutes first. So times that by 60, and whichever method you do, you should get 80, and now it's going to be kilometres per hour. The next question, so it's very, very similar really, apart from the fact I've changed the units of the distance this time. So you can see the units of the distance is now metres. And it's saying that we want the average speed in kilometres per hour, not metres. So in case anyone has forgotten, 1 kilometre is 1,000 metres. So the first thing I'll need to do is to change this into kilometres rather than metres. So if 1 kilometre is 1,000 metres, I need to divide this by 1,000. So if I put a point at the end, move it back 3 places, so that's going to be 3.2 kilometres. So that's good now, because that's the same units as what we need our speed to be in. So then again, you can see that the average speed needs to be in kilometres per hour. Now 1 hour and 50 minutes isn't particularly nice to change into a decimal if you're using that method. So I would work out the average speed in kilometres per minute first. So an hour is 60 minutes. So altogether it's 60 minutes plus 50 minutes, which is 110 minutes. So to work out the average speed, I'm going to cover up the s, so I've got to do the distance divided by the time. So the distance is 3.2, because I want it to be in kilometres. and I'm going to divide it by the time, which is 110 minutes. Now we just need to remember that when we do this, that's going to be in kilometres per minute rather than kilometres per hour. So before I changed it, it was 8/275, and that is kilometres per minute. Right, we want kilometres per hour. There's 60 minutes in an hour, so we're just going to go 60 times further. So I just need to times that answer by 60. And so then you get 96/55. So that's our final answer. So let's change it now into a decimal. So it'd be 1.75 kilometres per hour. But the next one then, this one involves working out a time, doesn't it? So at what time does Daniel arrive at work? So if we go back and read the question, he leaves the house at 7 o'clock. We know the distance is 87 miles, so that's going to be important. And he drives at an average speed, so we know the speed is 36 miles per hour. So the units are matching up. We've got miles there and miles per hour there, so that's all good. So in terms of working out the time, if I draw out the triangle, I'm trying to work out a time, so I'm going to cover up the T, and that means I need to do the distance divided by the speed. So I'm going to do 87 divided by 36. So 87 divided by 36 is 29/12. Well, that's going to be 2.416 occurring. So that doesn't really help us an awful lot at the moment. So we've got to, that's going to be in hours, and we've got to work out what time does Daniel arrive at work. Now, to change this into minutes, we know that there's 60 minutes in an hour. So if I times that by 60, that should make this a much nicer number, hopefully. So if I get my answer back up, times it by 60, so I get it's 145 minutes. So now going back to my time, it's at 7 o'clock, isn't it? So that's the time that he started, and we need to add on 145 minutes. Well, we know 120 is 2 hours, and then I've got an extra 25 minutes, haven't I? So if you add on 2 hours, that's going to be 9 o'clock, and then we've got the extra 25 minutes. So it'd be 9:25. I'm assuming, yeah, it's going to be AM, isn't it? 'Cause it's got 0 there. So AM. Right, the final question then. I don't think this one actually is quite as bad as that one. I think that's probably the worst question. So a plane travels 450 metres in 8 seconds. Find its average speed in kilometres per hour. So again, you can see we want the speed in kilometres, but that's in metres. So we need to divide this by 1,000 to change it into kilometres. So that's going to be, if I move the point back, so 1, 2, 3, 0.415 kilometres. And I'm going to work out the speed first of all in seconds, and then we'll worry about changing it to the hours afterwards. So I'm going to do speed is distance divided by time. So I'm going to do 0.415 divided by 8. So it's going to give me quite a small answer because this is per second, isn't it? So 0.415 divided by 8. So I get 83/1600. Now that is kilometres per second. So we want it in per hour. So first of all, let's think about how can we make it per minute. And there's 60 seconds in a minute, so I'd have to times that by 60. And then there's 60 minutes in an hour, so I would need to times it by 60 again. So basically I'm timesing it by 60 2 times. So that makes it 747/4, which is 186.75, and that would be, it's going to be kilometres, and now it's per hour.